Hello and welcome to Scriptures Unlocked. This presentation will take a detailed look at the 70 weeks prophecy found in Daniel 9, verse 24 to 27. It will be a detailed and exhaustive study of all the events surrounding the fulfillment of this prophecy. The first thing that needs to be noted is that the 70 weeks prophecy is a smaller portion of the 2300 days prophecy found in Daniel 8, verse 14, which states, "Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." And the 2300 days prophecy was given in the third year of Belshazzar's reign, as can be seen in Daniel 8, verse 1. While the children of Judah were in captivity in Babylon, Daniel understood the vision of the ram as representing Media Persia. And this is seen in Daniel 8, verse 20, and the he-goat to be a symbol for Greece, Daniel 8, 21. But he did not quite understand the prophecy of the 2300 days. Viewers, Babylon's dominance over Judah and the surrounding nations lasted for 70 years, as can be seen in Jeremiah 25, verse 1 to 12. And let us go there. We'll be reading a lot of scriptures to support and substantiate every point that will be made. This is what the scriptures tell us. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah. That was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. The which Jeremiah the prophet spake unto all the people of Judah and to all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, saying, From the 13th year of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, even unto this day, that is the 23rd year, the word of Jehovah had come unto me, and they have spoken unto you, rising early and speaking, but ye have not hearkened. And Jehovah had sent unto you all his servants, the prophets, rising early and sending them, but ye have not hearkened, nor inclined your ear to hear. They said, Turn ye again, now everyone from his evil way, and from the evil of your doings, and dwell in the land that Jehovah had given unto you and your fathers forever and ever. And go not after other gods to serve them and to worship them, and provoke me not to anger with the works of your hands, and I will do you no hurt. Yet ye have not hearkened unto me, saith Jehovah, that ye might provoke me to anger with the works of your hands to your own hurt. Therefore, thus saith Jehovah of hosts, because ye have not heard my words, and notice what God was going to do. Behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, saith Jehovah, and Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land and against inhabitants thereof, and against all these nations round about, and will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment, and an hissing, and perpetual desolations. Moreover, I will take from them the voice of mirth, and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstones and the light of the candle. And notice what will happen. And this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. So viewers, that was what was foretold in the time of Jeremiah. So during this period of time, the Jews will be taken as captives to Babylon. And this can be seen in Jeremiah 29, verse 1 to 14. Message to the exiles. Now, these are the words of the letter that Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem unto the residue of the elders which were carried away captives, and to the priests and to the prophets and to all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had carried away captive from Jerusalem to Babylon. After that, Jeconiah, the king, and the queen, and the eunuchs, the princes of Judah and Jerusalem, and the carpenters and the smiths were departed from Jerusalem by the hand of Elasah, the son of Shaphan, and Gemariah, the son of Hilkiah, whom Zedekiah, king of Judah, sent unto Babylon to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, saying, Thus saith Jehovah of hosts, the God of Israel, unto all that are carried away captives, whom I have caused to be carried away from Jerusalem unto Babylon. Build ye houses, and dwell in them, and plant gardens, and eat the fruit of them. Take ye wives, and beget sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons, and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters, that they may be increased there and not diminished. And seek the peace of the city, whither I have caused you to be carried away captives, and pray unto Jehovah for it. For in the peace thereof shall ye have peace. For thus saith Jehovah hosts, the God of Israel, let not your prophets and your diviners that be in the midst of you deceive you, neither hearken to your dreams, which ye cause to be dreamed. For they prophesy falsely unto you in my name. I have not sent them, saith Jehovah. For thus saith Jehovah, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word toward you in causing you to return to this place. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith Jehovah, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. And ye shall seek me and find me, when ye shall search for me with all your heart. And I'll be found of you, saith Jehovah, and I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations, and from all the places where I have driven you, saith Jehovah, and I will bring you again into this place, whence I caused you to be carried away. So that was what God told the people of Judah while they were in captivity. Babylon's dominance began in 609 BC, when the Assyrian Empire was defeated, and it ended 70 years later in 539 BC, when Belshazzar, the last king of Babylon, was slain by the Medo-Persian army. And this can be seen in Daniel 5, verse 30 to 31. In Daniel 9, the prophet was studying the prophecy of Jeremiah to ascertain when the 70 years would expire. Notice what we read in Daniel 9, starting from verse 1. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years whereof the word of Jehovah came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. I read it earlier in Jeremiah 25 and Jeremiah 29. And notice, Daniel understood that God was going to accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. The Hebrew word for desolations is harba, Strong's H 2723, and it simply means a place laid waste, ruin, waste, desolation, or destruction. The desolation of Jerusalem took place when the city and the temple were destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. And we can see this in 2 Chronicles 36, reading from verses 19 to 21. 2 Chronicles 36, reading from verses 19 to 21. Notice what we are told. And this is when Jerusalem finally fell to Nebuchadnezzar. And they burned the house of God, that's the temple, and break down the wall of Jerusalem, and burnt all the palaces thereof with fire, and destroyed all the goodly vessels thereof. And them that had escaped from the sword carried they away to Babylon, where they were servants to him and his sons until the reign of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of Jehovah by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years, which is 70 years. So God told the people that as a result of their sin against him, Jerusalem would be desolate for 70 years. So the desolation actually took place when the city and the temple were destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. And the city remained in ruins for 70 years, from 586 BC until the temple was rebuilt and dedicated in 516 BC. So from 586 to 516 BC, when the temple was rebuilt, that's a total of 70 years. So God is very precise in his pronouncement. The desolation of the cities of Judah and the temple was foretold as far back as Leviticus 26, verses 31 to 35. Notice what God had foretold all the way back in the time of Moses about what will happen if the people of Israel rebelled against him and were disobedient. God said this, and I will make your cities waste and bring your sanctuaries unto desolation. There's that word again. and I will not smell the savor of your sweet odors. And I will bring the land into desolation, and your enemies which dwell therein shall be astonished at it. And I will scatter you among the heathen, and will draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. Then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths, as long as it lieth desolate, and ye be in your enemy's land. Even then shall the land rest and enjoy her Sabbaths. So this backs up what we read earlier in 2 Chronicles 36 about the land being desolate and enjoying her Sabbaths. So notice that God is very precise. God told them about this all the way back in the time of Moses, that if they were disobedient, this is what was going to happen. And it finally occurred in 586 BC when Jerusalem was destroyed and the temple burned by Nebuchadnezzar's army. So Daniel was reading the book of Jeremiah, and he recognized that Jerusalem would remain desolate for 70 years. So in Daniel 9, Daniel's intercessory prayer that is found in verse 3 to 19 was predicated upon what he had heard in Daniel 8, verse 13 to 14 about the 2300 days. Daniel, viewers, was concerned and worried that God would extend the desolation of Jerusalem from 70 years to 2300 years. And this is confirmed by the last line of his prayer when he said this, and I quote, "O Lord, hear, O Lord, forgive. O Lord, hearken and do." And notice his next two words, "defer not." Or in other words, do not extend for thine own sake. O my God, for thy city and thy people are called by thy name. And that is in Daniel 9, verse 19. God answered Daniel's prayer even while he was still speaking, when the angel Gabriel was sent. And you can read about this in Daniel 9, verses 20 to 23. Daniel 9, verses 20 to 23. So notice what happened while Daniel was praying. And whilst I was praying, and whilst I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before Jehovah my God, for the holy mountain of my God. Yea, whilst I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, that's the vision of the 2300 days, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, "O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision." And then the rest of the chapter is where Gabriel was now going to give Daniel the 70 weeks prophecy about the Messiah, the Jews, and Jerusalem. So let us proceed as we continue to break down the 70 weeks prophecy. So this now takes us to the 70 weeks prophecy, which outlined God's timetable for Jerusalem's restoration, as well as the arrival of the Messiah, the Prince. Let it be clearly known, viewers, that this prophecy is referring to the Jews, Jerusalem, and Jesus Christ, who is the Messiah. It is not referring to anybody else. The 70 weeks prophecy has to do with the Jews, Jerusalem, and Jesus Christ, who is the Messiah. So let's read about this prophecy in Daniel 9, starting from verse 24 to 27. This is what Gabriel told Daniel. Gabriel said, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, and Daniel's people are the Jews, and upon thy holy city, and the holy city is Jerusalem. So Gabriel told him that 70 weeks are determined. The Hebrew word for determined is Strong's H 2852. I want to show you the meaning of this particular word. 70 weeks are determined, and it is Strong's H 2852. It is pronounced this way.
Strong's H 2852. Chafach. Chafach.
And it is translated only once as determined, and it means to divide, determine, to be determined, be decreed, be settled, be marked out. or in other words, a primitive root properly to cut off, that is figuratively to decree or determine. So what Gabriel was saying to Daniel is that God is going to cut off 70 weeks, and that 70 weeks will only pertain to Daniel's people and the holy city. So 70 weeks out of the 2300 days will be determined for the Jews and Jerusalem. So that is why I'm saying that the 70 weeks prophecy is a smaller portion of the 2300 days, because the word determined means it is cut off. This portion has been cut off, and it pertains only to the Jews and the city of Jerusalem. So let's go back to the prophecy as we read the prophecy in detail. So Gabriel told Daniel that 70 weeks are determined, or 70 weeks are cut off for thy people, the Jews, and upon thy holy city. And during the 70 weeks, 6 things were supposed to be accomplished. 1, to finish the transgression. 2, to make an end of sins. 3, to make reconciliation for iniquity. 4, to bring in everlasting righteousness. 5, to seal up the vision and the prophecy. And finally, 6, to anoint the most holy. And we'll get to what it means to anoint the most holy later. Verse 25 tells us this: know therefore and understand that from, which is the starting point, the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. And verse 26 says, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. And finally, verse 27 says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So this is the 70 weeks prophecy found in Daniel 9, verse 24 to 27. So the 70 weeks prophecy served as a probation period for the Jewish theocracy to return to God. Because since God established his covenant with Israel at Sinai, viewers, and that can be found in Exodus 19, verse 1 to 8, there have been constant rebellions and countless calls to return by the way of prophets, as can be seen in 2 Chronicles 36, reading from verse 11 to 16. So notice 2 Chronicles 36, 2 Chronicles 36, reading from verse 11 to 16. Notice what we are told. Zedekiah, who is the last king of Judah, was 120 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Jehovah his God, and humbled not himself before Jeremiah the prophet, speaking from the mouth of Jehovah, because prophets are spokesmen for God. But notice what he did. And he also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear by God, but he stiffened his neck and hardened his heart from turning unto Jehovah, God of Israel. Moreover, all the chief of the priests and the people transgressed very much after all the abominations of the heathen, and polluted the house of Jehovah, which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. And Jehovah, God of their fathers, sent to them by his messengers, rising up betimes and sending, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place, which is the temple. But notice what they did. But they mocked the messengers of God, and despised his words, and misused his prophets, until the wrath of Jehovah arose against his people, till there was no remedy. So that was what was happening, viewers, in the time before Nebuchadnezzar conquered Judah. The people were rebelling and committing all kinds of abomination in the sight of God Almighty. The constant transgressions is what led to the desolation or destruction of Jerusalem and the temple that Solomon built. So let's now unlock the 70 weeks prophecy by using 2 keys needed to understand this prophecy. So there are two keys that are needed to understand this prophecy. The first one is the day-year principle, which speaks to one prophetic day being equal to one literal year. And the day-year principle is derived from Numbers 14, verse 34, as well as Ezekiel 4, verse 6. Let me give you the background to this day-year principle. So while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, Moses had sent 12 spies into the land of Canaan to search out the land and to report their findings. But when they came back, they spent 40 days surveying the land, doing their reconnaissance. And after they returned, 10 of the spies brought an evil report about the land, while only 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, stated that they could take the land. The land is a good land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and that God is with them and that they could take the land. But the 10 spies outnumbered them, and they caused the people to murmur against God. And the people wanted to return to Egypt. And then God made a pronouncement that we'll read about, which establishes the day-year principle. And this is found in Numbers 14, reading from verse 34. This is what God said. After the number of the days in which he searched the land, even 40 days, each day for a year, that's a day-year principle, shall he bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and he shall know my breach of promise. So the 10 spies spent 40 days searching the land. God then converted each day for a year. So instead of 40 days, the children of Israel will now spend 40 years in the wilderness. And that is precisely why they spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness, because the 12 spies spent 40 days searching out the land. And God used the day-year principle, and he said, because you spend 40 days searching the land, I'm going to take each day for a year. So the 40 days became 40 years, and that is precisely why the children of Israel spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness. So when God is dealing with prophecy, one prophetic day is equivalent to one literal year. And this will become evident as we look at this prophecy. So the day-year principle is derived from Numbers 14, verse 34, as well as Ezekiel 4, verse 6, which says something similar. Therefore, 70 weeks times 7 days per week, because there are 7 days in a week, gives you 490 prophetic days. And according to the day-year principle, that now becomes 490 literal years. So when Gabriel told Daniel that 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, Gabriel was saying that 490 years out of the 2300 years will be probation period for the Jews and Jerusalem. The second key that is needed to understand this prophecy is that there's no 0 year when moving from BC to AD on the timeline. Therefore, when calculating from BC to AD, always add 1 in order to get the correct answer, because the year that follows 1 BC is 1 AD, since there's no 0 year on the timeline. So when you're moving from BC to AD, you count downwards. And when you get to 1 BC, the year that follows 1 BC is 1 AD. So now that we have these two keys, let's unlock and decipher the starting point of the 70 weeks prophecy. Daniel 9, verse 25 gives us the starting point of the prophecy when it states, from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and then 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. So we now need to know what is meant by to restore Jerusalem, because the prophet says, from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem. Restore and build are related, but they are not the same thing. So we need to know what is meant by to restore Jerusalem. To build Jerusalem, we know it means it has to do with construction of the city, walls, streets, and so forth, because it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. But what is meant by the word to restore Jerusalem? So before we can identify the starting point, we need to understand what it means by to restore Jerusalem before we can safely identify when such a commandment was given. The Hebrew word for restore is shuv, Strong's H 7725, and it means to give back or hand over power or territory. This is confirmed, viewers, to be so because the same two words that are used in Daniel 9:25 are also mentioned in 2 Chronicles 26, verse 2, which states, and notice the same two words that are used. And this is speaking of Uzziah. He built, that is Strong's H 1129, he built Eloth and restored it to Judah after the king slept with his fathers. So this particular king, King Uzziah, he built Eloth, this city, and then he restored it to Judah. He gave it back to Judah. Therefore, restoration means to give back or hand over political, judicial, military, as well as religious power to a territory for the purposes of self-government. This is absolutely important. So to restore means to hand over or cede power to an entity or an organization or a government for the purpose of autonomy. So there were 3 decrees that were given during the reigns of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, who were kings of Persia. So we need to identify which decree spoke specifically to restoring and building Jerusalem. This is important because it will give us the year and starting point of the 70 weeks prophecy. The first decree was given by Cyrus and can be read about in 2 Chronicles 36, verse 22 to 23, or in Ezra 1, verse 1 to 4, which is a repeat of what we found in 2 Chronicles 36. I'll read it shortly. So Cyrus's decree spoke only to the rebuilding of the temple, and this decree was given in 539 BC. Let's now go to 2 Chronicles 36 to read that decree that Cyrus gave. 2 Chronicles 36, reading from verse 22. This is what we are told. Cyrus permits return. If you notice here, it says Ezra 1, 1 to 4, which is a repeat of what we find in 2 Chronicles 36, verse 22, 23. Notice what we are told. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of Jehovah spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished. Jehovah stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation, or he made a decree throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing. So it was not just word of mouth. It was stated verbally, but it was also placed in writing. And this is what he said. Thus said Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth hath Jehovah, God of heaven, given me, and he hath charged me to build him an house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? Jehovah is God, be with him, and let him go up. So Cyrus's decree spoke specifically about building a house or a temple in Jerusalem. So viewers, that was the first decree that was given by Cyrus. This decree was a direct fulfillment of a prophecy written over a century before in Isaiah 44, verse 24 to 28, and 45, verse 1 to 4, and verse 13. We're going to read about this prophecy that was given about Cyrus, even before Cyrus's father met his mother, over a century before either of them were born. So notice what we find in Isaiah 44, reading from verse 24 to 28. This is what God said. Thus saith Jehovah, thy Redeemer, and he that formed thee from the womb. I am Jehovah, that maketh all things, that stretcheth forth the heavens alone, that spreadeth abroad the earth by myself, that frustrateth the tokens of the liars, and maketh diviners mad, that turneth wise men backward, and make their knowledge foolish, that confirmeth the word of his servant, that is the word of Jeremiah, and performeth the counsel of his messengers, that saith to Jerusalem, thou shalt be inhabited, and to the cities of Judah ye shall be built, and I will raise up the decayed places thereof. That word decayed is the word desolation. That saith to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up thy rivers. And notice what God then says. That saith of Cyrus, this is before Cyrus is even born, he is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure. Even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple, which is what the decree was about, thy foundations shall be laid. And in the next chapter, God foretold that he was going to use Cyrus. God uses Cyrus. Thus saith Jehovah to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. And I will go before thee, and make the crooked places straight, and I will break in pieces the gates of brass, and cut in sunder the bars of iron. And I will give thee the treasures of darkness, and hidden riches of secret places, that thou mayest know that I, Jehovah, which call thee by thy name, am God of Israel. So God said that to Cyrus, or he said that of Cyrus. And notice verse 4. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel mine elect, I have even called thee by thy name. Even I have surnamed thee, though thou hast not known me. So even before Cyrus was born, God surnamed him. God told Isaiah that he was going to use a man by the name of Cyrus to release the captives and to issue a decree to rebuild the temple. And notice verse 13. God continues to speak of Cyrus. I have raised him up in righteousness, and I will direct all his ways. He shall build my city, and he shall let go my captives, not for price nor reward, saith Jehovah of hosts. So God is very precise. And we are reading these passages to give you the chronological and historical context of what was happening at the time, to see how God was fulfilling his word that he gave to Daniel in Daniel 9, verses 24 to 27, which speaks to the 70 weeks prophecy. So let us continue to break down this prophecy as we proceed. So God used Cyrus to initiate, to kickstart the building of the temple. And from this decree, it will mushroom into the city of Jerusalem being rebuilt and being restored. But Cyrus was the initial one that issued the decree. The second decree was given in 520 BC by Darius, who reigned from 522 BC to 486 BC. This decree was a clear restatement of the first decree issued by Cyrus concerning the rebuilding of the temple and the temple alone. Let's read about this in Ezra 4, verse 1 to 5. Ezra 4, verses 1 to 5. This channel is called Scriptures Unlocked. So we are going to read the scriptures and we are going to be putting it in its proper context. So notice what was happening. Adversaries hinder the work. Now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of Israel builded the temple, so notice they were building the temple because they got a decree from Cyrus. So now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity builded the temple unto Jehovah, God of Israel, then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said unto them, let us build with you, for we seek your God as ye do, and we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Ashur, which brought us up hither. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the chief of the fathers of Israel said unto them, ye have nothing to do with us to build an house unto our God. So notice it's speaking about the house of God. But we ourselves together will build unto Jehovah, God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us. And notice verse 4. Then the people of Judah, then the people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in building. And then let's now go to the next chapter, Ezra 5, reading from verse 1 to 17. The temple work resumed. So there was a point in time when the temple was stopped, and we'll get to that a little later. Then the prophets, Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, the son of Iddo, prophesied unto the Jews that were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, even unto them. Then rose up Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and began to build the house of God, which is at Jerusalem. And with them were the prophets of God helping them. And if you look here, Zechariah 1 verse 1 tells us that in the 8th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of Jehovah unto Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo, the prophet, saying, so Zechariah was a contemporary to Ezra and these people. And verse 3 tells us this. Verse 2 says, then rose up Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and began to build the house of God, which is at Jerusalem. And with them were the prophets of God helping them. So the prophets were also helping to build the temple. At the same time came to them Tatnai, the governor, on this side of the river, and Shethar-boznai, and their companions, and said thus unto them, who had commanded you to build this house and to make up this wall? So notice, they asked them about who commanded them to build this house and to make up this wall. Then said we unto them after this manner, what are the names of the men that make this building? But the eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews, that they could not cause them to cease till the matter came to Darius. And then they returned answer by letter concerning this matter. Our adversaries write to Darius. So they were now complaining about the building of the temple. Adversaries write to Darius. The copy of the letter that Tatnai, governor on this side of the river, and Shethar-boznai and his companions are Artaxerxes, which were on this side of the river, sent unto Darius the king. They sent a letter unto him wherein was written thus, unto Darius the king, all peace. Be it known unto the king that we went into the province of Judea to the house of the great God, which is built great stones, and timber is laid in the walls, and this work goeth fast on, and prospereth in their hands. Then asked we those elders, and said unto them thus, who commanded you to build this house and to make up these walls? We asked their names also to certify thee that we might write the names of the men that were the chief of them. And thus they returned us answer, saying, we are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and build the house that was builded these many years ago. They are talking about Solomon's temple, which a great king, Solomon, king of Israel, builded and set up. But after that our fathers had provoked the God of heaven unto wrath, he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this house and carried the people away into Babylon. But in the first year of Cyrus, the king of Babylon, the same King Cyrus made a decree, which we read earlier, to build this house of God. And the vessels also of gold and silver of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that was in Jerusalem and brought them into the temple of Babylon, those did Cyrus the king take out of the temple of Babylon, and they were delivered unto one whose name was Sheshbazzar, whom he made governor, and said unto him, take these vessels, go carry them into the temple that is in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be builded in his place. Verse 16 says, then came the same Sheshbazzar and laid the foundation of the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. And since that time, even until now, hath it been in building, and yet it is not finished. So remember now, Cyrus gave the command in 539 BC. And the Jews were now saying that from that time, even until now, it has been in building. Because remember, the prophecy said that from the going forth of the commandment until the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks, which is 49 years. And the building of the temple took around that time to be completed. So they are saying now that from the decree was given by Cyrus, we have been in building, and it is the temple is still not yet finished. And notice verse 17. Now therefore, if it seem good to the king, let there be search made in the king's treasure house, which is there at Babylon, whether it be so that a decree was made of Cyrus, the king, to build this house of God at Jerusalem, and let the king send his pleasure to us concerning this matter. So that was what was happening at the time. And then the next chapter tells us, and this is very important for us to understand the context. Darius finds the decree. So the people of Israel were now saying, we have a decree from Cyrus to rebuild the temple. These adversaries are trying to hinder the work that King Cyrus had decreed. And they were saying to Darius, if you don't believe us, search your archives to see if there was such a decree issued by Cyrus in the first place, and then get back to us. So let's now go and read what Darius did as a result of the letter that the Jews sent to him. Darius finds Cyrus's decree. Then Darius the king made a decree, and search was made in the house of the rolls, where the treasures were laid up in Babylon. And there was found at Achmetha, in the palace that is in the province of the Medes, a roll, and therein was a record thus written. And here's the record. In the first year of Cyrus, the king, the same Cyrus, the king, made a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. So notice, Cyrus' decree concerned the house of God at Jerusalem. Very important. Let the house be builded, the place where they offered sacrifices, and let the foundation thereof be strongly laid. The height thereof, three score cubits, and the breadth thereof, 80 cubits, with 3 rows of great stones and a row of new timber. And let the expenses be given out of the king's house. So Cyrus's decree was very specific. Verse 5 says, and also let the golden and silver vessels of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took forth out of the temple, which is at Jerusalem, and brought unto Babylon, be restored and brought again unto the temple, which is at Jerusalem, everyone to his place, and place them in the house of God. Now, therefore, this is what he was going to decree now. Now, therefore, Tatnai, governor beyond the river, Shethar-boznai, and their companions, the Apharsachites, which are beyond the river, be ye far from thence. Let the work of this house of God alone. So leave them alone. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews build this house of God in his place. And let us make a point here. So you notice that even though the Jews went back, the Jews had a governor that was appointed by the Persian king. So Darius was now saying, let the governor of the Jews, who reported to the Persian king, and the elders of the Jews build this house of God in his place. So at this point in time, Jerusalem did not have full autonomy. They were still being governed by the Persian. Moreover, notice what he's going to decree. Moreover, I make a decree what he shall do to the elders of these Jews for the building of this house of God, that of the king's goods, even of the tribute beyond the river, forthwith expenses be given unto these men, that they be not hindered. And that which they have need of, both young bullocks and rams and lambs for the burnt offerings of the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, and oil, according to the appointment of the priests, which are at Jerusalem, let it be given them day by day without fail, that they may offer sacrifices of sweet savors unto the God of heaven, and pray for the life of the king and of his sons. And notice what Darius went on to decree. Also, I have made a decree that whosoever shall alter this word, let timber be pulled down from his house, and being set up, let him be hanged thereon, and let his house be made a dunghill for this. And the God that had caused his name to dwell there, destroy all kings and people that shall put to their hand to alter and to destroy this house of God, which is at Jerusalem. I, Darius, have made a decree. Let it be done with speed. So that is what Darius decreed. And then the rest of the chapter says, the temple completed and dedicated. Then Tatnai, the governor on this side, the river, Shethar-boznai, and their companions, according to that which Darius the king had sent, so they did speedily. And the elders of the Jews builded, and they prospered through prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they builded and finished it according to the commandment of the God of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia, even though Artaxerxes was not yet on the throne. This is just giving us how long they were in building of the temple. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month Adar, which was in the 60th year of the reign of Darius the king. And remember, Darius started to rule in 522 BC. So it clearly means that the temple was finished in 516 BC, which is the 6th year. And remember, the temple was destroyed in 586 BC, and it was finished in 516 BC. That is a total of 70 years, just according to the prophecy that God had gave to Jeremiah. So the house of God was finished in the 6th year, in the 3rd day of the month Adar, which is the last month of the Jewish calendar, in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. And the children of Israel, the priests and the Levites and the rest of the children of the captivity kept the dedication of this house of God with joy, and offered at the dedication of this house of God 100 bullocks, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and for a sin offering for all Israel, 12 he-goats according to the number of the tribes of Israel. So that, viewers, is what transpired around the issue of the second decree by Darius. Very important, so we can know and pinpoint the exact year that the decree was issued to restore and build Jerusalem. So let us proceed. So the third decree was issued by the Persian king Artaxerxes, which was mentioned in Ezra chapter 6. And Artaxerxes the first, commonly called Longimanus, he reigned from 464 BC to 424 BC. And viewers, it is important to note and understand the Babylonian and Persian regnal dating system, because both of these empires use the post-dating method. So in the post-dating method or system, when one king died and another ascended the throne, the remaining portion of that year was known as the accession year of the new king, and was not counted, notice very carefully, it was not counted as the first year of the new king's reign. Therefore, only the first full calendar year of a king's reign was considered to be his first year. So with that in mind, even though Artaxerxes ascended the throne in 465 BC, when his father Xerxes was assassinated, his first year of reign began in 464 BC, because that is when his first full year started. Therefore, Artaxerxes' decree was given in 457 BC, which was the 7th year of his reign. 7 from 464 gives you 457 BC. So Artaxerxes' 7th year was in 457 BC, and this can be seen in Ezra 7, verse 7 to 8. Let us read when this decree was issued. Ezra 7, 7 to 8. And let us read for the context, verse 6. This Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was already scribe in the law of Moses, which Jehovah, God of Israel, had given. And the king granted him all his requests, according to the hand of Jehovah his God upon him. And there went up some of the children of Israel, and of the priests, and the Levites, and the singers, and the porters, and the Nethinims, unto Jerusalem, when? In the 7th year of Artaxerxes the king. And then verse 8 confirms it. And he came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. And that 7th year was in 457 BC, because he started to reign in 464 BC, which was his first year as king. So viewers, the starting point of the prophecy is in 457 BC. So before reading this decree, it is important to get the background story again, leading up to Artaxerxes' decree in 457 BC, because a critical parenthetical narrative is given between Ezra 4 verse 1 to 5 and Ezra 4 verse 23. We had stopped at verse 5 when we were talking about Darius. So let us now go and read that narrative. So there was no decree given prior to Artaxerxes' reign concerning the building of Jerusalem. The previous decrees that were issued by Cyrus and Darius said absolutely nothing about rebuilding the city of Jerusalem. Only the temple and according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree nor statute which the king established may be changed. So the decree that were issued by Cyrus and Darius only spoke to the building of the temple. So no one else could go outside of what was decreed. So let's now read Ezra 4, verse 6 to 23 from the New Living Translation, because it gives us the parenthetical narrative about the building of Jerusalem and the accusation levied against the Jews during Artaxerxes' reign. So Ezra chapter 4, reading from Ezra chapter 4, reading from verse 6 to 23. So this is what we read earlier. And let us read verse 5. So the people at the time hired counsels against them to frustrate their purposes all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. And then the opposition to the Jews continued. So let us read it from the New Living Translation, which makes it a little clearer. So later opposition under Xerxes and Artaxerxes. So from Ezra 4, verse 6 to Ezra 4, verse 23, this is a parenthetical narrative that gives us the other oppositions that the Jews faced during the building of the temple. So let's now read about what was happening at that time in the reign of Artaxerxes' father, Xerxes, and in his reign. Years later, when Xerxes, and Xerxes also goes by the name Ahasuerus, which is another name for Xerxes, he reigned from 486 BC to 465 BC, when his son began to reign. So years later, when Xerxes began his reign, the enemies of Judah wrote a letter of accusation against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. Even later, during the reign of his son, King Artaxerxes of Persia, the enemies of Judah, led by Bishlam, Mithridath, and Tabeel, sent a letter to Artaxerxes in the Aramaic language, and it was translated for the king. Rehum, the governor, and Shimshai, the court secretary, wrote the letter telling King Artaxerxes about the situation in Jerusalem. And notice what they were going to write to Artaxerxes. They greeted the king for all their colleagues, the judges and local leaders, the people of Tarpel, the Persians, the Babylonians, and the people of Artaxerxes and Susa, that is Elam. They also sent greetings from the rest of the people whom the great and noble Ashurbanipal had deported and relocated in Samaria and throughout the neighboring lands of the province west of the Euphrates River. And notice what they wrote. This is a copy of their letter. So we are seeing what they actually wrote. This is a copy of their letter. To King Artaxerxes, from your loyal subjects in the province west of the Euphrates River. The king should know that the Jews who came here to Jerusalem from Babylon are rebuilding this rebellious and evil city. So notice what they were complaining about. They were complaining that the Jews were rebuilding the rebellious city, not the temple. They have already laid the foundation and will soon finish its walls. And the king should know that if this city is rebuilt and its walls are completed, notice it's about the city that they were complaining about, it will be much to your disadvantage, for the Jews will then refuse to pay their tribute, customs, and tolls to you. Since we are your loyal subjects and do not want to see the king dishonored in this way, we have sent the king this information. We suggest that a search be made in your ancestors' records, where you will discover what a rebellious city this has been in the past. And they are speaking about Jerusalem. In fact, it was destroyed because of its long and troublesome history of revolt against the kings and countries who controlled it. Speaking about Nebuchadnezzar. We declare to the king that if this city is rebuilt and its walls are completed, the province west of the Euphrates River will be lost to you. Then King Artaxerxes sent this reply to Rehum the governor, Shimshai the court secretary, and their colleagues living in Samaria and throughout the provinces west of the Euphrates River. Greetings. The letter you sent has been translated and read to me. I ordered a search of the records and have found that Jerusalem has indeed been a hotbed of insurrection against many kings. In fact, rebellion and revolt are normal there. Powerful kings have ruled over Jerusalem and the entire province of the Euphrates River, receiving tribute, customs, and tolls. Therefore, issue orders to have these men stop their work. That city must not be rebuilt except at my express command. Notice that? King Artaxerxes issued a decree that says that city must not be rebuilt except at my express command. Be diligent and don't neglect this matter, for we must not permit the situation to harm the king's interest. And then notice what happened. When this letter from King Artaxerxes was read to Rehum, Shimshai, and their colleagues, they hurried to Jerusalem. Then with a show of strength, they forced the Jews to stop building. And then this is where the parenthetical narrative ends. And then the last sentence or last verse of Ezra 4 tells us that, so the work on the temple of God in Jerusalem had stopped, and it remained at a standstill until the second year of the reign of King Darius of Persia. So this verse 24 should come immediately after verse 5. Because verse 5 says, they bribed agents to work against them and to frustrate their plans. This went on during the entire reign of King Cyrus of Persia and lasted until King Darius of Persia took the throne. And then we have the entire parenthetical narrative about what transpired as it relates to other oppositions under Xerxes and Artaxerxes. And then the last verse tells us that, so the work of the temple of God in Jerusalem had stopped from the time of Darius, and it remained, and that's about the temple. So the work on the temple of God. So this is talking about the temple. So Ezra 4 verse 1 to 5 and Ezra 4 verse 24 is speaking about the temple in Jerusalem. Ezra 4 verse 6 to Ezra 4 verse 23 was speaking about the rebuilding of the city of Jerusalem. So that is a parenthetical narrative that was inserted because they were speaking about the opposition at the time of King Darius. And that is why verse 24 then says, so the work of the temple of God in Jerusalem had stopped, and it remained at a standstill until the second year of the King Darius of Persia. And notice what is said here in this footnote. The second year of Darius's reign was 520 BC, because he started to reign in 522 BC. It says this narrative started in Ezra 4 verse 1 to 5 and is resumed at verse 24. So this, viewers, is very important to understand because many persons are confused when they read Ezra 4. So this is why I'm saying that it is important to get the chronology and the historical background to what was transpiring at the time. Let's go back to looking at the 70 weeks prophecy. So let's now look in detail at the contents of Artaxerxes' decree that was issued in 457 BC by reading Ezra 7 verse 11 to 26. So remember, we just read in the parenthetical narrative that King Artaxerxes had stopped the work early in his reign. He had stopped the rebuilding of the city. So let's now read Ezra 7 verse 11 to 26, which gives us the starting point of the Ezra 7 verse 11 to 26. So we already know that what transpired in Ezra 7 took place in the 70th year of Artaxerxes' reign. And we can just confirm that again. So let's go back to the King James Version. So Ezra 7 verse 7 gives us the time of this decree. So Ezra went up from Babylon to Jerusalem in the 70th year of Artaxerxes' reign. And it was confirmed again in Ezra 7 verse 8. So we know the year, and that was 457 BC. So let's now read the decree, King's decree on behalf of Ezra. So this is the decree that kickstarts the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel chapter 9. Now this is a copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes gave unto Ezra the priest, the scribe, even a scribe of the words of the commandments of Jehovah and of his statutes to Israel. Artaxerxes, king of kings, unto Ezra the priest, a scribe of the law of the God of heaven, perfect peace, and at such a time, I make a decree that all they of the people of Israel and of his priests and Levites in my realm, which are minded of their own free will to go up to Jerusalem, go with thee. For as much as thou art sent of the king and of his 7 counselors to inquire concerning Judah and Jerusalem, according to the law of thy God, which is in thine hand, and to carry the silver and gold which the king and his counselors have freely offered unto the God of Israel, whose habitation is in Jerusalem. And all the silver and gold that thou canst find in all the province of Babylon, with the freewill offering of the people and of the priests, offering willingly for the house of their God, which is in Jerusalem, that thou mayest buy speedily with this money bullocks, rams, lambs, with their meat offerings and their drink offerings, and offer them upon the altar of the house of your God, which is in Jerusalem. And whatsoever shall seem good to thee and to thy brethren, to do with the rest of the silver and the gold, that do after the will of your God. The vessels also that are given thee for the service of the house of thy God, those deliver thou before the God of Jerusalem. And whatsoever more shall be needful for the house of thy God, which thou shalt have occasion to bestow it out of the king's treasure house. So far, Artaxerxes was giving instructions concerning the temple in Jerusalem. Now notice what he said in verse 21. He's now going to speak about the city. And I, even I, Artaxerxes the king, do make a decree to all the treasurers which are beyond the river, that whatsoever Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven, shall require of you, it be done speedily. Unto 100 talents of silver, and to 100 measures of wheat, and to 100 baths of wine, and to 100 baths of oil, and salt without prescribing how much. Whatsoever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it be diligently done for the house of the God of heaven. For why should there be wrath against the realm of the king and his sons? And we certify you that touching any of the priests and Levites, singers, porters, Nethinims, or ministers of this house of God, it shall be done, it shall not be lawful to impose toll, tribute, or custom upon them. And thou, Ezra, after the wisdom of thy God that is in thine hand, and notice what he's going to say now, set magistrates and judges which may judge all the people that are beyond the river, all such as know the laws of thy God, and teach them, and teaching them that know them not. And notice how autonomy was now going to be given back to Judah and Jerusalem. And whosoever will not do the law of thy God and the law of the king, let judgment be executed speedily upon him, whether it be unto death, or to banishment, or to the confiscation of goods, or to imprisonment. So this is the decree that gave back autonomy, that restored Jerusalem. So Jerusalem now had autonomy, and they were now able to govern themselves. So they were able to set up magistrates and councils like they had before the Babylonian captivity. So let us proceed as we continue to break down the 70 weeks prophecy. So this is the decree which speaks specifically to the restoration of local government in Jerusalem. And you can see that even Isaiah had prophesied about it. In Isaiah chapter 1, reading from verse 1 to 7. Isaiah chapter 1, reading from verses 1 to 7, and then 21 to 26. So notice what we are told, the rebellion of God's people. The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. And this is what God was saying. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for Jehovah had spoken. I have nourished and brought up children, and they have rebelled against me. The ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib. But Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider. Ah, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken Jehovah. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger. They are gone away backward. Why should ye be stricken anymore? Ye will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faint. From the sole of the foot even unto the head, there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. They have not been closed, neither bound up, neither mollified with ointment. And then God told Isaiah, your country is desolate, your cities are burned with fire, your land, your strangers devour it in your presence, and it is desolate as overthrown by strangers. And notice verse 21 to 26. Notice what God then says. How is the faithful city become an harlot? It was full of judgment, righteousness lodged in it, but now murderers. Thy silver is become dross, thy wine mixed with water. The princes are rebellious and companions of thieves. Everyone loveth gifts and followeth after rewards. They judge not the fatherless, neither doth the cause of the widow come unto them. Therefore saith the Lord, Jehovah of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, I will ease me of mine adversaries and avenge me of mine enemies. I will turn my hand upon thee and purely purge away thy dross and take away all thy tin. And notice what God then says. And I will restore, here's the word restore again. I will restore thy judges as at the first, and thy counselors as at the beginning. Afterward, thou shalt be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. And this is what Artaxerxes' decree did. He restored, he gave Ezra autonomy to set magistrates and judges in the land again to fulfill what God had said to Isaiah in Isaiah 1 verse 26. So I'm giving you all these verses to support the assertion that when God gives a prophecy, he carries it out to the T. So let us continue to look at the 70 weeks prophecy. So this decree by Artaxerxes in 457 BC empowered Ezra to appoint magistrates and judges. So in other words, he was now setting up the judiciary, as well as to impose punishment on wrongdoers. Ezra also had the freedom to use the king's money, his silver and gold, as he saw fit. That is autonomy. That is self-government. So having established that 457 BC is the year and starting point of the 70 weeks prophecy, let's now explain the prophecy in detail by reading Daniel 9, starting from verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, and we now know that that took place in 457 BC. So from 457 BC unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So look at this now, viewers. So 7 weeks times 7 days is 49 days. According to the day-year principle, that is 49 years. 62 weeks times 7 days is 434 days, or 434 years. So from the going forth of the commandment unto Messiah the Prince will be a total of 69 prophetic weeks, or 483 literal years. So 49 plus 434 gives you 483 years. Therefore, 483 years after the decree was issued in 457 BC takes us to 27 AD, which is the exact year that Jesus Christ was baptized. So if you were to use a calculator and subtract 457 from 483, you will get 26. But remember, when you're counting, when you're moving from BC to AD, you have to factor in the 0 year, because there are no 0 year on the timeline. So you have to add 1. So 457 from 483 will give you 26. But from 1 BC, the next year is 1 AD. So you have to add 1. So the year would be 27 AD, not 26 AD. So from 457 BC, 483 years later, takes us to 27 AD, which is the exact year that Jesus Christ was baptized. Jesus Christ is the Messiah, the Prince. And the Hebrew word for Messiah is Mashiach, Strong's H4899. And it means anointed or anointed one. It is very clear that Jesus Christ was anointed at his baptism. And Jesus himself, along with John the Baptist and Peter, supports this fact in Luke 4:14-21, John 1:28-34, as well as Acts 10, verse 36-38. I'm just going to read Luke 4, verse 14-21. Luke 4, verse 14-21. So this is Jesus speaking about his anointing. So Luke 3 is when Jesus was baptized, and we'll get there not too long from now. And Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit into Galilee, and you'll see why later. And there went out a fame of him throughout all the region round about. And he taught in their synagogues, being glorified of all. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up for to read. And there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written. And he was actually reading from Isaiah 61, verse 1. And this is what he read from Isaiah 61. The Spirit of Jehovah is upon me, because he had anointed me. And he was anointed at his baptism to preach the gospel to the poor. He had sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of Jehovah. And he closed the book, and he gave it again to the minister, and sat down. And the eyes of all them that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he then said this, and he began to say unto them, this day is this scripture fulfilled in your ears. So what he was saying, the 70 weeks prophecy said that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto Messiah, the Prince, which is Jesus Christ, the anointed one, will be 483 years or 69 weeks. So Jesus was now saying to them that I am the Messiah, that Daniel 9, I am Messiah, the Prince, that Daniel 9 was speaking of. I am here. I have been anointed on time to fulfill my mission. And that is what was the significance of Jesus' statement to them in Luke 4, verse 21. So this firm date of 27 AD can also be proven from the scripture based on the clear historical markers that God has provided. Luke chapter 3 is very important because it gives us some very useful information that helps to locate the exact year of Jesus' baptism. Notice Luke 3, verse 1. Now in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, and then God is going to tell us who was in power at that time. So in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea, and Herod being the tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip, tetrarch of Iturea, and of the region of Trachonitis, and Lysanias, the tetrarch of Abilene. So God gives us some historical marker that we can know which date he was referring to. He says the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. That's a date that is set in history. So Tiberius Caesar reigned as Roman emperor from 14 AD to 37 AD, but he ruled as joint emperor or co-princeps with Caesar Augustus from 12 AD unto 14 AD when Caesar Augustus died. And just to remind you, Caesar Augustus was the Caesar, the emperor of Rome, when Jesus Christ was born. Because in Luke chapter 2, it was Caesar Augustus who caused the entire world to be taxed. And the Bible also tells us that at that time, Cyrus was the governor of Syria. That is in Luke chapter 2, verse 1 to 2. So the Bible gives us some clear historical markers. So Tiberius started his reign as emperor, his sole reign in 14 AD, but he reigned as joint emperor with Caesar Augustus, who was sick in the latter part of his reign, and Caesar Augustus died in 14 AD. So the scripture does give us historical markers that we can know the exact year of Jesus' baptism. So what I said about Tiberius Caesar serving as joint emperor is according to Suetonius, a Roman historian who wrote a set of biographies on the lives of the 12 Caesars. And there's the link on the screen. So This means that if Tiberius Caesar started to reign jointly with Caesar Augustus in 12 AD, then his 15th year would take us to 27 AD, the same year of Jesus' baptism. Additionally, this date of 27 AD can be verified as the year of Jesus' baptism, because it can also be used to locate the exact year that Jesus Christ was born. According to Luke 3, reading from verse 21, the scriptures tell us this. Now, when all the people were baptized, it came to pass that Jesus also being baptized, and praying, the heaven was opened, and the Holy Ghost descended in a bodily shape like a dove upon him, which is why after his baptism, he returned in the power of the Spirit, because he was anointed by the power of the Holy Spirit. And while he was being baptized, when he was baptized, a voice came from heaven which said, and this is God the Father speaking, "Thou art my beloved Son, in thee I am well pleased." And Jesus himself, notice this, Jesus himself began to be about, notice, about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli. Therefore, if Jesus was about 30 years old, God is being very specific. Jesus was not quite 30 at his baptism. So if Jesus was about 30 years old in 27 AD, then it simply means that he was born in 4 BC. So Jesus was 3 years old in 1 BC. And 27 years later, Jesus was about 30 years old, simply because the month of his birth came after he was baptized. So Jesus was not quite 30 years of age at the time. So let's now return to the latter section of Daniel 9, verse 25, having established the starting point of the prophecy, which is 457 BC, and the years that led up to the baptism of Jesus, which is 483 years later, which takes us to 27 AD. Let's now go back to explain what is meant by the streets shall be built again and the wall even in troublous times. Nehemiah, who was Artaxerxes' cupbearer, outlined what was transpiring during this time period. These events happened 13 years after the decree was issued in 457 BC, which was now the 20th year of Artaxerxes' reign. And this is the time, this time was 444 BC. This can be verified by reading Nehemiah chapter 1, reading from verse 1 to 3. So let us go to Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 1 to 3. So I'm giving you all the evidence to support and explain the 70 weeks prophecy. Nehemiah 1, verse 1 to 3. So when Nehemiah was in existence, Nehemiah was grieving for the exiles. And notice what we are told. Nehemiah tells us this. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah, and it came to pass in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan the palace, that Anani, one of my brethren, came, he and certain men of Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. So he was talking about the city. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity there in the province are in great affliction and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem also is broken down, and the gates thereof are burnt with fire. Let's now go to verse 11, which confirms that Nehemiah was Artaxerxes' cupbearer. O Lord, he started to pray, and he said, O Lord, I beseech thee, let now thine ear be attentive to the prayer of thy servant, and to the prayer of thy servants who desire to fear thy name and prosper. I pray thee, thy servant, this day, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man, that's the king. For I was the king's cupbearer. And the next chapter tells us this. Nehemiah 2, verse 1 onwards. Nehemiah's prayer answered. And it came to pass in the month Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes' reign, that is 444 BC, 13 years later, because the decree was issued in the 7th year of Artaxerxes. Now is the 20th year of his reign, which means that 13 years have elapsed. So he was there in the 20th year of Artaxerxes' reign. That wine was before him, and I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been before time sad in his presence. Wherefore the king said unto me, why is thy countenance sad, seeing thou art not sick? This is nothing else but sorrow of heart. Then I was very sore afraid, and said unto the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my countenance be sad, when the city, the place of my father's sepulchres, lieth waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire? So notice, even in 444 BC, the city of Jerusalem, the walls were still not repaired, and the gates were still desolate. Then the king said unto me, for what dost thou make request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. And I said unto the king, if it please the king, and if thy servant have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldest send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchres, that I may build it. And the king said unto me, the queen also sitting by him. So this parenthetical statement was included to let us know that there was a witness. For how long shall thy journey be? The king asked. And when will thou return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. Moreover, I said unto the king, if it please the king, let letters be given me to the governors beyond the river, that they may convey me over till I come into Judah. And a letter unto Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the palace, which appertain to the house, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall enter into. And the king granted me according to the good hand of my God upon him. Then I came to the governors beyond the river, and gave them the king's letter. Now the king had sent captains of the army and horsemen with me. So Nehemiah had military support. And notice what we read. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, heard of it, it grieved them exceedingly, that there was come a man to seek the welfare of the children of Israel. And then let's now go to Nehemiah chapter 4, which speaks about the wall and the work that was being done. So Nehemiah 4, verse 1 to 3, the work is ridiculed. But it came to pass that when Sanballat heard that we builded the wall, so notice it is the wall that was in contention, he was wroth and took great indignation and mocked the Jews. And he spake before his brethren and the army of Samaria and said, what do these feeble Jews? Will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish which are burned? Now Tobiah the Ammonite was by him, and he said, even that which they build, if a fox go up, he shall even break down their stone wall. And let's now go to verse 6 to 8. So we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together unto the half thereof, for the people had a mind to work. But it came to pass that when Sanballat and Tobiah, the Arabians and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites, heard that the walls of Jerusalem were made up, and that the breaches began to be stopped, then they were very wroth, and conspired all of them together to come and to fight against Jerusalem to hinder it. So that is why the prophecy said that the street and the wall shall be built, even in troublous times, because they were troubled in the time when the walls were being rebuilt. Let's now go to verse 16. Because they were troubled. And notice verse 16 to 23. And it came to pass from that time forth that the half of my servants wrought in the work, and the other half of them held both the spears, the shields, and the bows, and the habergeons, and the rulers were behind all the house of Judah. They which builded on the wall, and they that bear burdens with those that laid it, everyone with one of his hands wrought in the work, and with the other hand held a weapon. For the builders, everyone had his sword girded by his side, and so builded. And he that sounded the trumpet was by me. And I said unto the nobles and to the rulers and to the rest of the people, the work is great and large, and we are separated upon the wall, one far from another. In what place thereof ye hear the sound of the trumpet, resort ye thither unto us, or God shall fight for us. So we labored in the night, so we labored in the work, and half of them held the spears from the rising of the morning till the stars appeared. So they worked from morning till night. Likewise, at the same time, said I unto the people, let everyone with his servant lodge within Jerusalem, that in the night they may be a guard to us and labor on the day. So neither I, nor my brethren, nor my servants, nor the men of the guard which followed me, none of us put off our clothes, saving that everyone put them off for washing. And then let's just read the final verse that tells us that tells us when the walls were completed, and that is found in Nehemiah 6, verse 15. Notice what we are told. So the wall was finished in the 25th day of the month Elul, in 50 and 2 days. So the walls were completed in 52 days from the time that Nehemiah came to Jerusalem in 444 BC, which is the 20th year of Artaxerxes' reign. So that is very important to explain what Daniel 9:25 meant when it says that the streets and the walls shall be built even in troublous times. So viewers, this detailed narrative shows us that God is very precise when recording biblical history. Let's now explain Daniel chapter 9, reading from verse 26 onwards. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. So what we are told here is that the Messiah would be killed, but not for himself, because he died for all humanity, as the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world, according to John 1:29. Isaiah 53 also states that surely he, the Messiah, had borne our griefs. Notice our griefs, and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and Jehovah had laid upon him the iniquity of us all. So Jesus did not die for himself. He died for the sins of humanity and the sins of the Jews. The people of the prince that is mentioned are a reference to the Jews. So the people of the prince, Jesus was a Jew. So the people of Jesus are the Jews. So the people of the prince are a reference to the Jews and Israel as a whole, because this prophecy is speaking specifically, viewers, about the Jews and Jerusalem. It was because of the sins of the people of Judah why Jerusalem and the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in the very first place. And you can see this in Jeremiah 38, verse 17 to 21. Jeremiah 38, verse 17 to 21. Which tells us this. Then said Jeremiah unto Zedekiah, Thus saith Jehovah, the God of hosts, the God of Israel, if thou wilt assuredly go forth unto the king of Babylon, Babylon's princes, then thy soul shall live, and this city shall not be burned with fire, and thou shalt live, and thine house. But if thou wilt not go forth to the king of Babylon's princes, then shall this city be given into the hand of the Chaldeans, and they shall burn it with fire, and thou shalt not escape out of their hand. And Zedekiah the king said unto Jeremiah, I am afraid of the Jews that are falling to the Chaldeans, lest they deliver me into their hand, and they mock me. But Jeremiah said, They shall not deliver thee. Obey, I beseech thee, the voice of Jehovah, which I speak unto thee. So it shall be well unto thee, and thy soul shall live. But if thou refuse to go forth, this is the word that Jehovah had showed me. And then verse 23 tells us this. So they shall bring out all thy wives and thy children to the Chaldeans, and thou shalt not escape out of their hand, but shall be taken by the hand of the king of Babylon, and thou shalt cause the city to be burned with fire. So it was the people of Judah who caused Jerusalem to be destroyed in the first place. And the Bible tells us that Zedekiah, the last king of Judah, he did not listen to Jeremiah's word. He tried to escape the city, but he was captured. His two sons were slain before his very eyes. And after they were slain, and him seeing it, his two eyes were gouged out by the Babylonians. And he was then taken into captivity into Babylon. So the scripture outlines all these things for us. So let us continue. So the people of the prince, who are the Jews, were the ones who caused Jerusalem to be destroyed. Similarly, Jerusalem would be destroyed again because the Jews because of the Jews' rejection of the Messiah. Jesus spoke of this destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in Luke 19, verse 37 to 44. So let us look at what Jesus said about the temple. Luke 19, verse 37. Notice what we are told. And when he, Jesus, was come nigh, even now at the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that he had seen, saying, Blessed be the King that cometh in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. And some of the Pharisees from among the multitude said unto him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. And he answered and said unto them, I tell you that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. And when he was come near to behold the city, and wept over it, and he said this, If thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belongeth unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the days shall come, future tense, the days shall come upon thee, that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side. And they shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. Luke 21, verse 5 to 6. And as some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and the gifts, he said, As for these things which ye behold, the days will come, in the which there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. So what Jesus was speaking about then was a part of the 70 weeks prophecy. This was in reference to the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, led by General Titus, who later became Caesar and Emperor of Rome between 79 to 81 AD. Daniel 9:27 speaks to the final week of the 70 weeks prophecy and covers the public ministry of Jesus and culminated with the stoning of Stephen in 34 AD. So 70 weeks or 490 years were cut off for the Jews, and 69 weeks or 483 years later, from 457 BC, brought us to the start of Jesus' public ministry in 27 AD. Therefore, there was only 1 week or 70 years of probation remaining for the Jews. This is corroborated by Daniel 9, reading from verse 27. So remember, Gabriel said that 70 weeks are determined, and then that 70 weeks were broken down in 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So that's 69 weeks out of the 70. So that means that 1 week was remaining. And verse 27 of Daniel 9 tells us about this 1 week. What will happen in this 1 week to the Jews and Jerusalem? And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate. So this section is speaking about what would transpire in 70 AD. So the final week was divided into 2 parts, because the Messiah would be cut off in the middle of the 70th week. There are 7 days in a week. So this means that Jesus will be crucified in the midst of the week, or 3.5 days, which is equal to 3.5 years after his baptism. So since Jesus was baptized in 27 AD, then it is absolutely clear that Jesus was crucified in 31 AD. 3.5 years from 27 AD takes us to 31 AD. And he was going to be cut off in the midst of the week. So the crucifixion of Jesus Christ brought an end to the sacrificial system. And this was signified when the veil of the temple was rent in twain from top to bottom, according to Matthew 27, verse 51, because the true Passover lamb was slain. Jesus was the antitype, and all the lambs that were sacrificed from the Old Testament time up to the point of Jesus were types of the sacrifice that he would make. So when type met antitype, the sacrificial system came to an abrupt end. Viewers, the scripture states that the Messiah shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and Jesus definitely confirmed the covenant with his people, which is precisely why he preached only to the Jews and commanded his disciples to do the very same during the final week of the 70 weeks prophecy. And this is confirmed in Matthew 10, reading from verse 1 onwards. Jesus said this, or the scripture tells us this. And when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of diseases. And verse 5 tells us this. These 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them, saying, and notice what he said to them, because he had the 70 weeks prophecy in mind. Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of who? The house of Israel, because the 70 weeks prophecy spoke specifically to Israel, the Jews, and Jerusalem. The Messiah clearly had the 70 weeks prophecy on his mind, again, when talking about forgiveness in Matthew 18. And notice what we read in verse 21. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Jesus said unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Very instructive. 70 times 7 is equal to 490 times. And a time is equivalent to a year. So the Jews were given 490 years to seek forgiveness and make reconciliation for iniquity. But they rejected the Messiah, which is why John 1 verse 11 states, he came unto his own, and his own received him not. So viewers, even after Jesus' death, the Jews still had 3.5 years of probation remaining in the 70 weeks prophecy. But their fate was sealed when Israel rejected Jesus as the Messiah and then stoned Stephen. The book of Acts outlined the events which unfolded in the 3.5 years after the death of Christ. And the 70 weeks prophecy came to an end with the stoning of Stephen in 34 AD, according to Acts 7, verse 59. So viewers, that is a detailed explanation of the 70 weeks prophecy using the scriptures to support everything that has been said. Here are a few charts which depicts the 70 weeks prophecy that we have just discussed. So you have 70 prophetic weeks, or 490 years. We know that it started in 457 BC when King Artaxerxes issued that decree. 7 weeks from that is 49 years later. And this 7 weeks pertain to the rebuilding of the temple. And then after the 7 weeks would be 62 more weeks, which will take us all the way to AD 27, which is when Jesus was baptized. This is Jesus, the Holy Spirit, taking the bodily form of a dove above him, and John the Baptist seeing that. So from the time that the decree was issued in 457 BC, would be 483 years later, which takes us to AD 27. And then the prophecy tells us that in the midst of the week, the Messiah shall be cut off. In the middle of the week, the final week, takes us to AD 31. Jesus Christ is crucified. And then you had 3.5 more years remaining for the prophecy to be completed. And this takes us to AD 34 when Stephen was stoned. So this is just a graphic representation of all that we have studied. So the 70 weeks started in 457 BC. 483 years later takes us to the date and the year of Jesus' baptism, which is 27 AD. Jesus started his public ministry. His ministry lasted for 3.5 years, and he was crucified in the middle of the week in AD 31. And then he was going to confirm the covenant when he started his ministry for 1 week. So they still had 3.5 more years remaining, and that 3.5 years culminated in AD 34 when Stephen was stoned. So here's another graphic. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. That's a total of 490 years. And you can see the marker, 457, decree to rebuild Jerusalem. Jerusalem was rebuilt in 408 BC. Then the next important date of this prophecy is in AD 27, when Jesus is anointed by his baptism. 3.5 years later takes us to AD 31. Jesus is crucified, and his sacrifice, his death brought an end to the sacrificial system. And then the remaining 3.5 years takes us to AD 34, when Stephen is stoned. So viewers, here is the final graphic. So remember I said initially that the 490 years or the 70 weeks is a smaller portion of the 2300 days. So it started in 57 BC. The 70 weeks prophecy ended in AD 34. So if you subtract 490 years from 2300, you will get 1,810 years. So from AD 34 to 1,810 years later takes us to 1844, which is when the sanctuary would be cleansed. And this is what Jesus is doing even at this point in time. So from 1844, the sanctuary started to be cleansed. And that started investigative judgment. So the scripture gives us clear guidelines and historical markers so we can track the work of Jesus in the heavenly sanctuary. So Jesus started cleansing the sanctuary in 1844, because that's when the 2300 years ended. And Daniel 8:14 says, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So from 1844, the sanctuary started to be cleansed, and Jesus is doing that work of cleansing even at this point in time. So there you have it, is the 70 weeks prophecy in detail. I hope that this presentation was clear. All the scriptures were presented to support everything that was stated. So have yourselves a wonderful day as we continue to study God's word to prove all things.